Hi all, Rick here, and today I'm looking into an impressive vessel from the canon of Star Trek Online, the flagship class of the Klingon Armada, the BortaSqu class battle cruiser. So, the Bortas came into existence because the Klingon Empire was a playable faction and required their own answer to the Federation's flagship, the Odyssey Class Enterprise F, slated for a 2012 release. The design was a direct continuation of the classic D7 silhouette, as was the Voyager and the Nekfar before this. Adam Williams was responsible for the final model after a concept had been selected to develop, and while the overall shape seemed clear, the detailing was more intricate and consideration was given to suggest its sheer size. This origin is shared with its in-universe design too. The Bortas class heavy battle cruiser came about as a direct response to the Federation's own Odyssey Class Star Cruiser, with the moving of the Odyssey class's launch date to an earlier point. In the timeline of Star Trek Online, the Klingon Empire fell into war with the Federation once again in 2405, and because of this, the enormous cruiser of the Federation raised concerns that they were challenging the Empire at its own game. So the Chancellor demanded a vessel that was from the start a flagship class for the Empire. The Warship Advancement Council was responsible for modernising the Klingon fleet, and their engineers at the Tygo Core Fleet Yard had already been planning this class for a time, but never had the resource-intensive warship permitted until the green light from the Chancellor. For years, they had been analysing countless combat reports and performances from numerous battleships across multiple fleets, whether their own, Dominion or Federation. The WA Council concluded that bigger and more threatening vessels tended to last longer in combat engagements, especially with Starfleet, than medium or smaller ships, as Starfleet's tactics tended to shy away from massive coordinated strikes on single targets if there were multiple threats present, favouring the targets they could easily take down. Enthusiastically, they were able to begin production with the Bortas class, the largest and most powerful vessel the Empire had ever produced. The superior scale was not simply a matter of pride for the Klingons. As much like the Odyssey class it was rivaling, the sheer size allowed for a massive degree of versatility with additional defences and weapons. This class also mirrors the development of other flagships, at least those of Starfleet, notably the Enterprises. For a flagship, the Enterprise is often selected from a proven line of cruisers that might be more specialised in one area but are generally all-rounder, top-of-the-line starships of their era. This is the case for the Klingon IKS BortaSqu. It began as one of the Bortas class battle cruisers, but was then the recipient of specialist upgrades and developments in 2409, launching as the new subtype variant, the BortaSqu battle cruiser class. The name is derived from the previous Klingon battle cruisers of the Defence Fleet known as the Bortas. This is Klingonese for vengeance, which lent its name to the Bortas class, and BortaSqu basically adds the word fierce or great in there. The BortaSqu class is an astounding 1,126 metres long with a crew of 3,600. That is a lot of soldiers of the Empire, and many of these were actually combat-ready warriors for boarding parties or groundside deployment. It was literally carrying a small army with it, ready to exploit any failing shield or vulnerable installation, with beaming in assault teams as the Klingons excelled in close combat. In terms of armaments, of course it was laden with the Klingon-favoured flavour of disruptor beams, turrets and cannons. The exact amounts and locations for all of these weapon points is unclear, but I've based these on what is visible in-game. There are 6 main disruptor cannons in front of the vessel at its head. These are the main batteries of the ship and sacrifice a wider field of fire for longer pre-fire chambers and greater firepower. Alongside of these are 4 wider targeting beam turrets, On the rear are these two jutting weapons platforms that are lined with 3 beam turrets on each side and 2 more emitters on the underside of each nacelle. This is a total of 14 disruptor beam turrets, but with a ship this big I bet there are more. In terms of torpedoes, by default it was equipped with photons, however it has been noted to fire the occasional transphasic torpedo, so it seems they did carry multiple payloads. There were 4 main forward launchers alongside its cannon batteries, and at the rear on the end of the weapons platform there were 4 more launchers. The heavy disruptor autocannon was the BortaSqu's ace in the hole and located in the middle of the deflector, and it was an overpowered rapid-fire disruptor cannon that required a long period of reset and a 3-minute cooldown after firing. But for the seconds it was active, it unloaded a shredding barrage of disruptor fire, 12 times the power of a standard cannon. In terms of defences, naturally, it had extensive hull armour across all known energy and radiation effects, mostly dibernium alloys that could be adaptive. This combined with the adaptive emergency systems to redistribute energy where needed and modify the shields as they received incoming fire. On top of this, the BortaSqu could release a dampening wave that nullified many energy types, not only fluctuating other ships' systems briefly, but also damaging the cohesion of energy beams, lessening their impact. They were also equipped with a subspace snare, which was a short-range subspace fold-creating device that encapsulated a target, effectively warping them to another location. However, it was a seldom used technology because of 2 factors. Its short range means that you could not use it for travel, literally a half-second warp 1 jump would get you further, and it was disrupted by too many standard shield modulations like changing polarity or employing a scattering field. However, it was added to the Bortas class because of its lack of turn circle. Thanks to that, it could take too long to bring the weapons to bear on a target, so the alternative could be to bring the target into your weapons arc. It also had a cloaking device, naturally. But it was bad. The cloak was unable to compensate for the massive size and power output of the BortaSqu class, and because of that, it, when running, could still be detectable. Well, it highly mitigated its profile, so it was not exactly useless, just you could still track them at close range, especially Starfleet, with all their fancy sensor suites. However, once again, it did have a use. Just because you can tell where it was, did not tell you what direction it was facing, and tied to the cloak was a surge of power supplied to manoeuvring thrusters, so the mighty vessel could cloak and then use this brief confusion to turn to bring its weapons to bear. Man, it seems the Klingons seem to go through a lot of trouble to make creative workarounds to prioritise their forward-facing cannons. They could just put more power into their manoeuvring, or use less powerful turrets and I feel like a room full of Klingon engineers blankly stared at me for suggesting that. Thanks to events unfolding around the timeline of Star Trek Online, several improvements and new systems were added, including a timeline stabilizer. This was a cheeky experimental device that allowed for a marginally faster flow of time inside a vessel than outside it, meaning that there was more time to make repairs, adapt or plan. Now, a feature added to the BortaSqu that the Bortas did not have was the Hossus, Bird of Prey, which was a separate starship entirely, made specifically to dock at the rear of the BortaSqu. This small BOP was a manoeuvrable smaller craft that had a starship designation all of its own, and could be deployed in combat or as an auxiliary vessel for planetary flight and landings. A favoured tactic was to distract with the Hossus while the BortaSqu got its cannons all lined up. The vessel had 2 large impulse engines at the rear that provided considerable momentum, but had poor manoeuvrability. The warp core was a massive standard matter-antimatter reactor built in the same style as the Nekva and other ships, and the vessel was capable of accessing established transwarp corridors. And with that, this is the lore and in-universe history of the mighty Klingon flagship, the BortaSqu. There is a Klingon design philosophy that says that their best warships are only designed during wartime, so that everything can be battle tested as it is implemented, with the crucible of combat producing the most fearsome vessels, forged in fire and quenched in blood. The BortaSqu is what happens when the Klingons refuse to be outdone by the softer Federation. I've been Rick. Glory to the Empire, and honour to your house. Goodbye.